the reception of the three unities in different European countries. So, in fact, the three unities, which was a Greek classical concept, was introduced in Italy in the 16th century, and it remained a major literary influence and an influential force for the next 300 years. And it dominated the literary scene in Italy. And you had major playwrights and dramatists conforming and writing in accordance to the three unities. They observed the three unities in their works. In fact, in 1514, author and critic Gian Giorgio Trissino, you can see his picture to the right of your screen. He was the one who introduced the concept of the unities in his blank verse tragedy, Sophonisba. And after that, many Italian playwrights who came after him in the 16th century also wrote in accordance to the unities. So we can see that the three unities was very well received and followed in Italy. Moving on to France, 120 years after the three unities was introduced in Italy, this concept came up once again, and this time it came up in France with a translation by Jean Marat. Now, amongst the critics in the literary circles, in the critical on the critical scene, amongst the critics, you had Pierre Corneille, who was an ardent supporter. In fact, he was a neoclassical critic because he was all for reviving the classical tenets of criticism. So he was an ardent supporter. And to your right, you have a picture of Corneille. He supported the concept of the three unities, and he also made his best efforts to keep within the limits of time and place, to adhere to the unities of time and place. But on the other hand, there was another faction in France which completely opposed the three unities. And this was, in fact, the romantic strain. And we're going to look at when we look at the history of literary criticism, we will see how the Romantic movement, which later caught up in England and which started from France, was a major literary force which did not want to adhere to these classical rules of the three unities because it found them very rigid and stringent, and it was all for creative expression and freedom of imagination and spontaneity in your creative works, and therefore you had a major opposition from the people from the Romantic school of criticism in France, and foremost amongst them were Victor Hugo, Alexander Dumas, and there were many others like them who were against the three unities. Back in England, if you see the reception, in fact, compared to Italy and France, you see that the three unities had relatively less influence and impact in England. You have their adherence in the playwrights Ben Jonson and John Dryden. Uh, Shakespeare's The Tempest. If you have to look at the best example of the three unities, you have to take up Shakespeare's The Tempest, which takes place on one island. So the entire play happens on one island during the course of 4 hours, so within 24 hours, and with one major action, which is that of Prospero reclaiming his role as the Duke of Milan. So it observes all three unities. But Samuel Johnson, who's a major critic, you find him rejecting this previous dogma of classical unities and argues that drama should be faithful to life. And it should not preoccupy itself so much with classical traditions and consequently the three unities.